In this episode of Locked On Lightning, we're continuing our midseason grades. Today, we talk about the goaltenders and defenders. All that and more, but first, let's play that music.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Tanker. I just want to remind you that this episode of Locked On Lightning is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Today, we're discussing we're continuing our discussion on the midseason grades. If you want to backtrack, we last week did the forwards. We basically went off of what the player cards that theathletic.com posts for each player, and basically we make our own assumptions there. Well, not our own assumptions, but we give everybody a grade. And I believe the only player that didn't get a grade last week was Anthony Cirelli, because he hasn't played really that many of games. He got a little bit of a late start. Didn't start playing till about November. So I'm gonna give him a grade though at the end of the season when we do our end of the year grade. So we'll backtrack on him. But today we're talking about our defenders, we're talking about our goaltenders, and these I've been really much looking forward to because the storyline with the Lightning, why are they playing well? We always talk about that, but why aren't they playing well? What are some of the reasons as to why maybe they're third in the division instead of maybe second? Because I firmly believe they're a way better team. Well, not way better, but I think that they are a significantly better team than the Toronto Maple Leafs. So we'll start first with one of the best defenders in the NHL for the entirety of his career. This year, he has really taken a step back, and that is Victor Hedman. Victor Hedman, and if you're watching us on YouTube, you can follow along with the graphic. If not, if you're listening on an audio platform, I'll talk everybody through it. Don't worry. So we start with Victor Hedman today. So Victor Hedman, this season through 42 games played, averaging about 24 minutes of ice time, 2 goals and 31 points. And that's a little bit of, not a little bit, but a way bit of a setback for Victor Hedman, who does average around the 14 goal mark. Had 20 goals last year. His ice time is a little bit down this year. Not significantly down, but still nonetheless. And the thing, obviously, the glaring thing that you see for him on his offensive side of things is the points. 31 points, on track to finish with 64. That's not too far down from what he normally does. In 1920 and 2021, he finished both those years with 68 points. Last year, he had very much of an uptick in his points with 85. So what is the issue? What is the issue with Hetty? Why is we feel as Leafs as a whole? And also, the other thing on this card, just keep in mind, we do have the salary versus the market value, which surprisingly enough, his salary is 7.9 AAV, but his market value is 9.4. So there is a bit of an uptick there, but you must be asking yourself, Adam, then what are you saying? Why is he having maybe a little bit of a down year? It's because I believe it was back in November. He missed a game. I believe it was a lower body injury. And since then, he has not been himself. And it's one of those things where, we talk about stats so much, heavily involved. Can't talk today, people. Heavily involved in today's game. And this goes across all of sports, not just the NHL. And with Hedman, yeah, you might look at his numbers and say, well, he's not too far off. Yeah, he's far off the pace of what he had last year. But if you look at how the player Victor Hedman is, the movements, the eye test, uh, this is a completely different player. You see on the defensive side of things, not as quick or as agile. We do see flashes of that ability that we are so accustomed to seeing from Victor Hedman. And it's a little bit of a frustrating time for this to happen, considering the Lightning defensive core hasn't been exactly up to, I guess, the standards that we have seen from it over the last. I would guess I would probably say 4 seasons, and a lot of that has to do there's been a little bit of a change, a little bit of a changing of the guard. Jan Ruda leaving in free agency, whereas Ryan McDonough was traded to Nashville to alleviate some salary cap stress on the team. And then that coupled with Victor Hedman obviously dealing with some sort of injury that is kind of holding him back from playing the way that we all expect him to. So the good thing is, though, that we got the All-Star break coming up. He's going to have a week off and kind of be able to pretty much do nothing and be able to recuperate and stay off his feet. And hopefully, I did see something online. It was interesting. And this is probably a conversation for a whole nother episode. There was a Lightning Twitter user. I don't remember the handle, and I wouldn't say it out loud because I don't want them to get any flack. But they said that the Lightning should put him on IR for the rest of the season, and or trade him actually, which is even a kind of an out of pocket thing to say. He's injured. He's not out of his prime. Those are two different things. So it's interesting to see what the Lightning will do with him going forward. I don't think it's going to get to the point that he will be placed on IR, but I think that there needs to be some sort of decision to be made on what to do for Victor Hedman, not about Victor Hedman. And I think that's the really important thing that we all need to remember, that, as at a character as his play has been this year, I don't think he has been that much of a detriment to this team to where he is single-handedly losing games. Now, um, actually, in the past, I think the Lightning have been so spoiled with his play that it's almost um, it's brought them back down to earth and has allowed other players like Erik Cernak and Mikhail Sergachev and along with the emergence of Nick Perbix, which we'll get to a little later on, has really allowed those guys to flourish and really have more of an effect on the defensive side of things, more so than what we've seen in years past. So speaking of Mikhail Sergachev, we're moving on to him real quick to end the segment, the first half of this segment. So Mikhail Sergachev, salary of 4.8 mil currently, market values at 9. And right now he sits at 6 goals, on pace for 10, 30 points on the season, on pace for 52. And really, I think that this has been the year that we've all been waiting from Sergachev, because I firmly believe, and I've said this over the past couple of years, if you've been a listener of this show, that Sergey has been, I think, he's been one of the players that where he shows flashes in a pan of the potential that he has. We all know that he has. And we still we still see that development. We still see all of that. He's very young. A lot, it feels like he's been around for 20 years, but he's only 24 years old. But really, we're starting to see the potential emergence of the star, or the changing of the guard, have you, if you want to call it that, where the next great defenseman on this Lightning team, um where not only that, I mean, he has really, I think, cleaned it up defensively. Last year he was a big issue. It was a big issue for him. Turnovers were a big issue for him. A lot of his turnovers, especially at the blue line, led to odd man advantage chances down the other way. And he's really cut down on that this year. We've seen some instances of that bubbling back to the surface, but for the most part, I think he's really done a good job of really playing a cleaner game. And the thing that I really like the most about him, and I've always liked about him, and I've said this from day one since we've started this show, is that he he has the potential, and you see it, and you saw it during these two playoffs, the two Stanley Cup runs. Excuse me, like I said, I can't talk today. Bear with me. Is that he he shows that he could do everything. He's a five-tool defender. He could score. He could defend. He could play physical. He could be a leader out there. He could quarterback a power play. And we're starting to see all that come to the surface, especially with the offensive numbers taking a jump this year. I would like to see him score a little bit more often. Now, obviously, I can't expect him to do what Erik Karlsson has done this year with San Jose, but one could dream. I think he definitely has that potential, and I think that if you're looking at the next, like I said, the next big defenseman to be one of the leaders on this team, because yeah, Victor Hedman's 32, but as we all know, defensemen tend to either have a lot of longevity or they tend to break down relatively fast. So, uh, as much as you would love to see Victor Hedman play for the next, 7 years, I mean, you always got to prepare for the future, and Mikhail Sergachev is definitely the future. So we'll continue our midseason grades, and right now I'm giving Sergachev and Hedman. I'm giving Hedman probably a B minus, Sergachev probably a B. I think Sergachev, like I said, I think he's playing a lot better this year. I would like to see him score a little bit more, not significantly more, but a little bit more here and there. And like I said, we do see the turnovers here and there, not as often as we saw last year. And then Hedman, I'm giving him a B minus because I still think, all things considered, with the injury, that the undisclosed injury that he does have, I still think that he has played well. I think he's played solid. Has he been a first line defensive level of play? I don't think so. I think that given who he is and what he's done before, that first line defensive spot is definitely his and will always be his for as long as he's on this team. But yeah, I think that really it comes down to injury. I think if he could get rested, if he could, unless this is something that requires surgery, which that would be a nightmare if that's actually is what happens. I think that the All-Star break will be the best thing for him, and it can't it can't come soon enough for Victor Hedman. So we'll keep on discussing the defensemen, and then we'll go on to the goaltenders to end the show in just a little bit. But first, I want to talk about today's sponsor, and that is FanDuel. Now, the NFL playoffs are here. We're really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On, because they're the number one sports book in America, FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. And I love FanDuel because it's super easy to use and the app is super safe. If you're just new to betting, they have all types of bets that you could place on any scenarios throughout the course of a game, a sporting event. So go there right now. So football fans, sport fans, don't miss out. Place your first $5 bet on and get $150 in free bets, win or lose, at FanDuel.com/locked on. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So once again, I want to thank everybody for making us your first listener of the day. And if you haven't already done so, please go ahead and like and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. Give us a follow on our YouTube page, and hit that notification button. And once again, below this video, drop your comments, drop your grades for all the players, not just the defensemen. I want you guys to also put your grades, if you haven't already done so, for the forwards. Do that as well. So yeah, I mean, Victor Hedman, how much can we really talk about him to a point? like I said, I think it's just a matter of him being injured and really it's one of those things where he just needs time. He really needs the time to get his body right. But the one shining star, I mean, there's been a couple of moments and stars on this team on the defensive side of things, but the one of the players that I think has been really clutch this year, especially with the absence of Ryan McDonough being traded to Nashville, has been Erik Cernak. And Erik Cernak has really, in my opinion, slid into that role of being the defensive defenseman, uh, the guy who really has to make the big plays here and there, uh, relatively easily. And I think this was a role that I think everybody expected him to fall into. And this market value number that, and like I said, these cards, these player cards, if you want to call them, are all provided by the Athletic. Now Chernak's salary is 3 mil. His market value is 2.8. So he's actually viewed, and it's funny, the role, if you look at the top right of the card, if you're watching this on YouTube, it says he's a def defenseman. I don't agree with that in the slightest. I really don't. If I could control the lines myself, I would have Erik Cernak play on the first line every single shift, every single game with Victor Hedman. I just really like what Cernak has done. Like I've said with Hedman, you know, yeah, we look at the numbers in hockey. We look at offensive production as well in today's NHL, but at the same time, you know, numbers don't tell the whole difference. Now, take it as you will, the offensive numbers with Cernak. I don't care. I don't even look at plus minus as like a big thing for defensemen. I look at, with defensemen in the NHL, you always have to, unless they're an offensive defenseman, uh, like a Cal McCarr or an Eric Carlson, you can't really judge these guys solely based on the offensive numbers, because that's a majority of these guys, that isn't their game. That isn't something that they could do. And Chernak, that's certainly not something for him. He has 10 points on the season. One of those is a goal. He's on pace for 3 goals and on pace for 22 points. Uh, right around pretty much what you would expect him to be. Had a little bit of a jump in 2021, 32 points there with 9 goals, but I'm not expecting him to be at the top of the list of the offensive, categories for a defenseman. But Chernak, like I said, I think he has done a very good job. There's certain defensemen like Mikhail Sergachev, like Victor Hedman, you kind of expect them to do everything. Erik Cernak, that's just simply not his game. He plays defense. That's it. That's fine. That's more than I would like for him. And I think that he's done a very good job. And yeah, I would expect him, if he could just stay healthy, which we all know he has had some of his issues with injuries back in the past. If he could just stay healthy, I think that this team would be fine, especially in the playoffs where defense is such a huge part of the game. And a guy like Cernak who can get down and block shots, that's going to be a big deal. And as we all know, um, clogging up shooting lanes is such a big deal in the NHL playoffs. So I give Cernak a B plus. I think the only thing holding him back from having an A is just a little bit more just a little bit more diversity to his game, which it is what it is. Um, I'm sure, depending on what his numbers will be at the end of the season, he could definitely get himself up to an A, even if his offensive numbers do not take a jump. And because, like I said, with Chernak, it's not just about numbers. It's really not about numbers. It's more about, what he's doing on the ice, what he's doing on the defensive side of things. And there's really not that many statistical uh, uh, categories in the NHL that could characterize the effect that a player has uh, on that part of the game. So moving on to one of the newer faces on this Lightning team, and that is Ian Cole. Now, Ian Cole, I was in the offseason when he was signed. I was a little bit surprised with the signing. I wasn't really too crazy about it. He's 33. He's got a lot of miles on him. His market value, he has been playing well this year. His salary is 3 million. His market value is 7.7. And he kind of, and I don't know who made, and I agreed with a lot of these numbers and the rules. If you want to go back to the forward segment that we did last week, I agreed with most of those. I don't know who did these for the Lightning for the defenseman, but I don't agree with any of these roles. They're saying he's a top four. I don't think Ian Cole is a top four defenseman. He's definitely a third line. Um, and and that's pretty much it. I mean, he's not young, but he's not old. I just think that he's a depth guy at this point in his career. He's good. He's made some very good plays this year. He kind of reminds me of like a poor man's Erik Cernak with a whole lot more experience. I think that that's what Ian Cole brings to the table. I think that's what the Lightning have needed, especially with some of, the young defensemen that they have had early on in the season, especially with Cal Foote, who has just been, it's just been disappointing with Cal Foote this year, which we don't have a grade for him. I mean, the grade for him is just, even though he doesn't have a card in this segment, Cal Foote is probably a D. I really don't want to give any players D's, but I mean, Cal Foote has not played well this year, and so I really think that Ian Cole's really his job this year was to come in, be a solid defender on the third line, lead his teammates out there, and he's done that. He's done what he kind of reminds me of a defensive version also of the kind of role that Pierre-Edouard Bellemare has. He just needs to go out there, do the small things, and that is enough. And he has done that. So I would say probably a B, solid B for Ian Cole. Really not looking for too much out of him in terms of what else is he going to do, what he can do. Would be nice if we could get a little bit more offensive production out of him. But I mean, we could say the same for every single defenseman on this team. So we're gonna we're gonna talk about today's sponsor real quick, and then we'll finish up these reviews in our last segment. But first, I want to talk about our last sponsor of the day, and that is Athletic Greens. I love Athletic Greens. I use them every single day. I use it in the morning every single day with one scoop and a cup of water. That's all I need to get me started. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient and daily nutrition. It's just one scoop and a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NHL Network. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/NHL Network. Take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. So wrapping things up here, we're continuing our grades. We just finished up with Ian Cole. We've done Mikhail Sergachev. We've done Victor Hedman. We've done Erik Cernak. And we have a couple more names plus the 2 goaltenders to talk about. And so we got Zach Bogosian back with the Lightning once again, which is weird. It's like I said, going back to what I said about the rules that whoever has put on these cards. They had Ian Cole as a top 4 defenseman. On what team is he a top 4 defenseman? Maybe not on the Lightning, 100%, but on other teams, probably, depending on who we're talking about there. But Zach Bogosian, another player another defenseman that his job is just to go out there, play defense, shut down the other team. And that's what he's done for the most part this year. Only played 21 games thus far this year, which is fine. I'm indifferent about it. He's done what he's supposed to do this year. He seemed a little slow at times, but he's a big guy, 6'2", 222 pounds. He does take a beating on a nightly basis. So, you know what? All things considered, Zach Bogosian, another leader out there on the ice for this Lightning team, especially with some young Lightning defensemen out there. I'm going to give Bogo a solid B. I think he has played well for what you would expect to get out of him. And yeah, that reflects perfectly in his salary versus market value. 900K there and 900K on both sides. So it is what it is. I mean, I'm perfectly fine with him. I would wish that we could get him more consistently on the top line with Hedman. Um, it, just because that's very nostalgic part to me, at least, especially with Bogo's first year with the Lightning. He does play mostly on the first line with Hetty, but I feel like, and we all know this, Cooper will change things up throughout the course of a game. And I mean, I said the same thing about Erik Cernak. So, but obviously you can't have three defensemen out there at a time unless it's a PK. But even then, I do like I said, I could interchange Cernak and Bogo out there on the first line with Hetty. That's why before when I was talking about, I don't know what the Lightning have planned for Victor Hedman. If they're going to sit him out here and there for a couple of stretches just to get him ready for the playoffs. I don't think that would be a bad idea heading into the later months of the season. And you have Bogo and Cernak playing with each other on the first line. I think that's perfectly fine. Those two guys, Bogosian, Cernak, Cole, Sergachev, you have a bunch of leaders on this back end there for the Lightning. So, and a lot of guys who, aren't going to score except Sergachev and Perbix, but those guys, the other guys are there to be the anchors. And, Bogo's been nothing but an anchor during his tenure with the Tampa Bay Lightning. So, a B for Zach Bogosian. So moving on to Nick Perbix, who has lit the world on fire, at least the Lightning world on fire. And you can see it, rookie, 4 goals this year, 12 points. And the reason why I think a lot of people have been very impressed by him. And again, the I don't know who's putting in these roles for these cards, but none of this makes sense. His role is the press box. I don't understand. I don't understand. I don't know. Are we saying that now he doesn't deserve to be in the lineup, Athletic? I just think that he has been a very pleasant surprise. Like I said, out of the players in this offense, this defensive core, the offense predominantly really comes from Sergachev and Hedman. And in a year where Victor Hedman has not really played well, and when I say well by Victor Hedman standards, Nick Perbix has played well. And he's also shown that he has potential, if he has continued to develop. And he's a little bit older than you would imagine, that you would expect from a rookie. He's 24. That's because he went to college. I would like to see him maybe develop a little more if there is room for development. Like I said, he's 24. I feel like with a lot of players around 24, 25, 26, that's kind of what you see is what you get. And Nick Perbix right now kind of reminds me of Erik Cernak, but with a little bit more offensive prowess. And I would like to see him take on that offensive role. I don't know what that would entail. Now he's currently on the line with Mikhail Sergachev, which is perfectly fine. You have kind of like an offensive-minded sort of line. I would like to see John Cooper, and maybe this is something some Lightning fans could agree with me with, is that a couple of seasons ago, when we went into the bubble, and then the season afterwards, one thing that really stood out, and this was really the reason why Victor Hedman was scoring a lot of goals and tallying a lot of points, is because John Cooper was having him inch up into the high slot. And he was being very aggressive in the offensive zone, which is great. My question is, I'm curious to see if John Cooper would be willing to do that with Nick Perbix, because I feel like he is smart enough. He has the instincts to where He's not going to do that on every single offensive possession. Like I said, he is way mature than your average rookie, which works in his favor. So, what are the chances that he starts to do that? Maybe as the season progresses, we start to see Nick Perbix start to really maybe emphasize more of his offensive game. Because, like I said, the defensive part is for him, especially, is very instinctual, and him going to college, that's a big deal, and that in college that builds a lot of maturity for defensemen, and you see it with him the way he's played this year. So, what are the chances that we start to see in the second half, at least, of this NHL season, or the regular season, and potentially the playoffs, that we start to see Nick Perbix's offensive numbers start to shoot up a little bit more? He starts to score at a little bit of a higher rate. Um, Food for thought for Lightning fans. So that my grade for Nick Perbix, I will say A, because I think what you expected of him, I think you expected him to just fill the role of placeholder for Zach Bogosian while he was out. Erik Cernak out here and there. Victor Hedman missed the game. Um, you really expected him to just be a placeholder and then be sent back to Syracuse, and no, he has forced John Cooper to not only keep him in the lineup, but keep him on this team. And in a year where we all thought Cal Foote was going to be the guy to take that next step, surprise, surprise, a guy named Nick Perbix, 24-year-old rookie, steps in and snatches that spot from him. So wrapping things up, we're talking goaltenders. We're talking goaltenders real quick now. We're going to start with Brian Elliott because I want to wrap it up with Andrei Vasilevskiy. Brian Elliott, I think out of the last couple of years, I love that the Lightning continue to find backup goaltenders who were once very good goaltenders. I mean, Brian Elliott, I think, has like one of the fourth greatest goals against average in an NHL season ever. During his time with St. Louis, at one point one of the better goaltenders in the NHL. And I love that the Lightning find these guys that um, they don't have to play a lot of games and they're still very much effective. I think Brian Elliott, maybe I'm a little biased with this, uh, one of the better backup goaltenders in the league right now. He's one of those guys where, I mean, you look at his performance last year: 9 games played, 11 wins, a shutout. Which I remember that game. That just shows you that the Lightning really struck gold with him as a backup. And this year he's done a very good job through 12 games, 9 wins, not a shutout yet, but a guy that really not as quick or with the reflexes or quick with to certain sides of the crease as maybe some other goaltenders, but he's smart out there. He's willing to he's able to weather the storm, and that shows his veteran experience. And really, I gotta give Brian Elliott a B plus. I mean, only just because an A, because he's only played 12 games. So that is what it is. But Brian Elliott, like I said, one of the better backup goaltenders in the league, and definitely the best a better choice out of potential backups to have behind Andrei Vasilevskiy. And speaking of Andrei Vasilevskiy, this has been a conversation that we've been having all season long about Vazzy. Little bit down in terms of where he is compared to other goaltenders. But keep in mind with Andrei Vasilevskiy, if you look at his numbers this season compared to where they were the year he won the Vezina, not too far off. And one has to think, has his performance taken a dip, or is the goaltending across the league just gotten better? And I'm inclined to say that the goaltending has just gotten better. I mean, you look at some of the stats of some of the top goaltenders in the league that statistically are at the top of the league, or if you just want to look predominantly in the Vezina Trophy race, these are video game numbers. These are really stats that are, I don't think you could sustain throughout the course of an entire season. For example, I bring this up every day, but Linus Ullmark from the Boston Bruins just having an insane year. I believe last time I checked, his goals against average was under 2, which that's not gonna that's not gonna really that's not gonna hold up. I think he's gonna go through a rough patch, and we're gonna see somewhat of a dip in his goals against average. But if you look at Vasilevskiy, 33 games played this year, 20 wins, no shutouts, which is fine. Save percentage of 916. Pretty much around what you would expect uh, from him. So, you know what? I know the saves thing. I've been making a big deal about it all season long, but with Vazzy, I feel like, and you could see from the 1920 season, uh, once he gets a couple of shutouts under his belt, I mean, he just goes on an absolute tear. And I think that we're going to really start to see uh, John Cooper. I mean, we saw it over the past month with him, but we're going to start to see John Cooper, I really think, start to let Vazzy off the leash a little bit. What I mean by that is that in the beginning of the year, John Cooper wasn't really playing Vasilevskiy that much just because he played him way too much at the end of last season. And then there was certain nights where Vasilevskiy just looked mentally and physically drained. Um, but I think this year, he's done a good job of really kind of reining him back early on, getting him the rest when he really needs it. And you're starting to see him, especially over the end of December, and definitely in this month of January, we're starting to see him start to let him go out there and play back to backs, and give him time off against some of the lesser teams, and keep him fresh against the better teams. So Vasilevskiy, I'm going to give him a B minus just because I feel like there are certain moments throughout this season thus far where, even though as great as he's been up until this point, um, he lets in just like these little rinky dink goals. And I think that that's something, as a veteran goaltender who we all consider to be at the top of his class and the top of his position, you can't be having that. That's not something that is going to be able to help you to continue to be successful forward, because at the end of the day, it's not going to be the highlight goals that beat you. It's going to be the little ones, the little tap-ins, the ones where the goaltender really should have stopped it, and it squeaks through. Those are going to be the ones that are going to come back to bite you and haunt you in the later stages of a game. So let me know below what you think about our grades. What do you what are your grades? Where do they rank against mine? And yeah, we're definitely going to do a grading at the end of the year. Take a look back on these segments, and see how these players have really progressed since then. So in the meantime, we'll be back tomorrow to recap tonight's game against the Minnesota Wild. The Lightning conclude their series against the Wild tonight at Amalie. So check that out, and we'll be back tomorrow, like I said. So in the meantime, that's been it for this episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Danker. I'll talk to you in the next one.